Good morning from the Atlantic Council in Washington. Today I'm pleased to welcome you to the launch of a new publication, Beyond Critical Minerals, Capitalizing on the DRC's Vast Opportunities. It certainly sounds like a book. This is exactly what has happened here with 6 authors coming together to shape a roadmap for the Democratic Republic of Congo. Please allow me to thank them individually for their time, energy, and bright ideas. Dave Peterson, former Senior Director, Africa Program at National Endowment for Democracy. Welcome, Dave. Bemba Pezo Dizolele, lecturer at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Welcome, Bemba. Raba Areki, Distinguished Fellow, Freedom and Prosperity Center at the Atlantic Council. Thomas de Drebrezé, Director of Strategy Development at Robank. Nicole Namwezi Batumike, Gender and Responsible Sourcing Specialist at Panzi Foundation. Welcome, Nicole. And Calixte Aukposi, DRC Mission Chief at the International Monetary Fund. Welcome, Calixte. Together, we wanted to see beyond the critical minerals. As you know, the Atlantic Council's largest programs in Africa have focused on the DRC and on critical minerals for years now. Coincidentally, these are the 2 priorities of the new administration. 2 weeks ago, Corina Sanders, the US Deputy Assistant Secretary for African Affairs, was here to share more about the US DRC talks on peace and critical minerals, having just returned from Congo. However, this country is too large, the size of Western Europe, and too complex to be reduced to its cobalt and copper. First and foremost, Congo is a country of 120 million people, with a capital city that has more French speakers than Paris. However, the country has 200 languages, which speaks volumes about its sophisticated culture. It is also an Atlantic country in the West and belongs to the Congo Basin, whose rainforests are the second lung in the planet. In short, Congo is a country of agriculture, maritime power, infrastructure challenges, promising financial services and creative industries. Congo needs to take a transformative path to thrive and stop the 3-decade-long war in the east of the country that has cost 10 million Congolese lives. We say here that if Congo goes well, Africa will be fine. Speaking of Africa, to discuss trade, commerce, business, and the economy, we have invited Ambassador Troy Fitrell. I think we can safely say that, Ambassador, you are a good friend of the African continent. We are grateful that you accepted our invitation. You are the Senior Bureau Official leading the Department of State Bureau of African Affairs. You were recently, or you are still, I think, US Ambassador to the Republic of Guinea. You have also held positions as Director of the Offices of West African Affairs and Southern African Affairs, as Chargé d'Affaires, and as Deputy Chief of Mission at the US Embassies in Ethiopia and Mauritius. You have also worked at the embassies of Ghana and Zambia. Ambassador Fitrell, welcome to the Atlantic Council. We saw you at the Africa CEO Forum in Abidjan announce a lot of things, the launch of the new US commercial strategy with Africa, and very quickly in September, a US-Africa summit in New York. It is a fairly aggressive agenda, but we like it. We are ready. We hope to hear more, the details, the priorities, your future role, DFC, AGOA, a lot to talk about. Over to you, Troy Fitrell.
Fear not, these are just some notes. I won't be reading to you. First off, welcome, friends. Thank you for being here. And I hope that by just saying that, welcome, friends, that's inclusive for everyone. That includes Ambassador Yad, our panelists, everyone. The fact that you're here means you're a self-selected audience of people who do care about these issues. That should not be a niche market anymore. I think one of the key factors we need to have is a full understanding of what it means to engage with the DRC, what it means to engage with Africa, and how it's not done out of well-meaning altruism, but actually because it's solidly important. You know, my staff are always feeding me with the facts of, you know, in 2050, one in every 3 workers on Earth will be African and things like that. And I'm frankly sick of hearing about that. I don't really care about 2050 in that sense. Africa's important right now. DRC is important right now. African governments are full, important, critical members of the world stage right now, and we should recognize that. So, Ambassador Yad mentioned that in Abidjan we launched our commercial strategy. And the idea behind that was that's what we see that works. We have spent 60 years doing development assistance, and many of the countries are not noticeably different for it. Don't get me wrong, I love our assistance projects. I love our colleagues. I love the work that we've done. But countries don't develop out of altruism. They develop out of solid commercial advancement in their own interests. And in that sense, you can look around various countries. Let's use Ghana as an example. You know, back when bauxite was discovered or began to be processed on a regular basis in Ghana, it could have been a country where you just simply dig up the bauxite, load it onto a ship, and take it away. But they took a massive investment in infrastructure and built the dam and created Lake Volta to have the electricity to process the bauxite into aluminum. And here's the funny thing. That one signature project basically created Ghana's middle class because they were pretty much the only people in the country who had actual, reliable, formal sector employment. And Valco did one really interesting thing there. They had a plan where for their employees, when they reached age 50, they could cash in half of their retirement right then, which gave, for the first time in that country, the opportunity, the capital to do things. They could buy a house. They could start a business. They could send their children to university somewhere. Those children of Valco became the thriving center of the middle class in Ghana. And when you look at Ghana, just say from, you know, I served there in 1997, almost 30 years ago. The difference between Ghana today and Ghana 30 years ago is just dramatic. But it's because of what that middle class was able to create. Now, I'm not holding up Ghana as the single point plan for everywhere on earth, but you see that in various countries. In Guinea, it's CBG. You see that in various places. Those kinds of investments really mattered and really made a difference. So the strategy we had was, first, we need to leverage our diplomatic platforms and make commercial diplomacy a core focus. We always said it was a priority, but we also said that 35 other things were priorities. And so trimming away a lot of those others and putting commercial diplomacy really first, that changed some things. I made sure our ambassadors knew that this was their duty and that they would be judged on this. And that made a difference. I would say, I think at the last count, we have, since January the 20th, we have 71 new deals worth more than $7 billion. And that's a dramatic change. Second, we need to work with African countries, our host governments, and the private sector. And to do that, we tend to work through the American Chambers of Commerce because they tend to do some amazing work in that regard about what is needed to improve the business climate. This is not hostile. This is not making demands. It's the host governments want more investment. They want more commercial activity. How do we get there? What's in the way? And so working with them on those, on improving the business climate was the second one. Third, of course, is just straight up infrastructure. That's just targets. In certain countries, if they haven't invested in infrastructure in 60 years, then there's 60 years worth of infrastructure that needs to be done right now. So there's a lot of opportunity in that. And when I say infrastructure, everybody tends to think, okay, we're talking about rail and roads and some ports, maybe electricity. Let's not forget digital. Digital infrastructure is absolutely critical. If you want to participate in the modern economy, you better have a digital backbone. And that matters. Fourth, are just conducting commercial diplomacy trips. I need to get people from Washington. I talked about you as this self-selecting community. I need to drag people out of this town and get them overseas and get them to understand what's happening. That's why I was at the CEO Forum in Abidjan. That's why next week I'll be in Luanda for the Corporate Council on Africa Summit. It's why we're doing these things. Next is connecting U.S. companies. We have 300,000 companies in the United States who are export ready, but who don't do any business in Africa. And that's absurd. We need to do a lot better job at promoting market opportunities there. And the last, lest anyone think I'm just pointing the fingers at our African governments, we need to get our own house in order. We need to get our finance and our trade promotion entities in Washington organized, aggressive, and active. And that means DFC, EXIM, TDA, the State Department, the Department of Commerce, in many cases, the Department of Energy. We need to speak as one group. Over in embassies, we have what we call the deal teams, and it's everybody in the embassy who might possibly touch on commercial opportunity gather together as a task force. We started doing that here in Washington as well. When I receive a delegation from overseas, I get my colleagues from EXIM and DFC and Commerce to come join me for these meetings. So one, so that the delegation doesn't have to have 4 different meetings across town, but also so that they don't hear 4 different things. And then when we leave that meeting, we know who owns what and what we agreed on doing. Those are the 6 points, and that's why we're doing this. Especially, we need to be more aggressive in that. I think currently the failure cap designed for the EXIM Bank is 2%, and we're not even reaching it. I want to double that to 4, and I want to be challenging to go past that at all times. We need to be aggressive. If you're going to sit at under 2%, you're kind of acting like a regular bank, and we have lots of regular banks. I need an export-import bank to be aggressive. I want them to fail sometimes. That's how we know we're getting there. Now, we're here today to talk about DRC in general. I'm sure some people are interested in the peace process going on right now. This coming week, we do have technical teams here to try to get to the next stage. We've done those principles. Now we've been arguing about putting those principles into action. We've done, I think, as much as we can on online video calls, emails. It's time to get the teams back together again, so we're doing that right now. Now, the timeline, as you may have heard, we did those principles in April. We have these technical teams here today. We're still shooting for a June or July peace agreement. That's kind of what U.S. brings to the table, is an extremely aggressive timeline, frankly, an ambition. There's no sense fooling around on this. If we're going to do it, we do it now. We aren't going to wait 6 months for the next meeting. We need to get this done. And so, yeah, that's what we're on. And I should note, the reason why we're involved is because both parties asked us to be. Both parties said, okay, maybe you can get this thing done. And so that's why we're right in the thick of it. But the key act is that there are a number of processes that you've heard about. You've heard about Luanda and Nairobi processes. We now have a Doha process. And then, of course, there's the AU process. These are not separate venues that can be played off one another. Those are organized, those are coordinated, and they are mutually supportive. And in fact, we will have the Qataris here next week as well as part of the negotiations. Now, critical minerals. This is supposed to be beyond critical minerals, but it's worth mentioning that we call them critical for a reason. I mean, this is what's gotten the world's attention. Great. Let's not waste that. So while we say we have to go beyond the critical minerals, let's not forget that those are a hugely important component. The amount of them, the scarcity, and the utility, in everything we do for a modern life. That matters. It's got the attention. Let's not waste that. But as long as we talk about critical minerals, let's not forget that the world's economy is built on steel, aluminum, and copper. And for 2 of those, DRC is one of the most important countries in the world, if not the most important country in the world. And the thing about these base metals is the infrastructure they require is the same infrastructure we need for all the other forms of development. If you move tiny, tiny amounts of gallium, you don't actually need a railroad for that. But if you're going to move millions of tons of copper, you do. And those railroads, that power, that organizational capacity, that's all what we need to make agriculture work as well. And this is where I'm going to diverge kind of distinctly. When you have a society where 70% of the income comes from the mining sector, but 70% of the people are involved in agriculture, you have this fundamental divide between the people and the economy, and that is unsustainable. And when I say unsustainable, I mean you're not going to get anywhere with that. You need to have people involved in their own economy, involved in their own state, which currently is not the case. But mining can be used for that in that regard. If you want investments in agriculture, if you want that kind of social development, you need that infrastructure for it. And like I said before, when you talk about infrastructure, don't forget digital. You need that. So when it comes to the United States activity, remember, we don't have state-owned enterprises that I can just simply direct to go do a thing. But that is a strength, not a weakness. The fact that I can leverage and access and promote the innovation that comes from the private sector. If you want to just dig a big hole in the ground and ship that dirt off somewhere, we'll be blunt, the Chinese do that very well and very cheaply. The river's going to be brown and the forest is going to be brown and a bunch of your workers are going to die every year, but they can do it cheaply. But if you want innovation in the mining sector, if you want the river to still be blue and the forest to still be green and your workers to actually have a tech transfer and professional development and inclusion in that, then you go with the people who do that. And I would say that in the DRC, you can just go look at the mines. Look at the ones that are run by American or Western companies, and you see fairly modern, neat, professionally operated, safe work environments. And you go to the others and you will see an apocalyptic hellscape. That's the difference. That's what you leverage in order to have the next step of the economy. I mean, you have these companies. You need the quality. Other options might be cheaper up front, but you need to be able to factor in full-on life cycle costs. Wabtec locomotives, which used to be called General Electric, pretty much every Wabtec General Electric locomotive ever built is still operating today. Whereas I challenge you to find a locomotive made by China that's still operating after 10 years. That life cycle cost makes a difference. The innovation matters. Drilling techniques are phenomenal. You know, the United States has had this amazing economic growth over the last 15, 20 years, frankly, thanks to us becoming an energy exporter instead of an energy importer. And everyone says, all right, well, you learned how to frack, and that's how you just fracked your way out of this. Well, fracking is not as easy as it sounds. The advances in drilling technologies are incredible. And what we've learned from those advances in drilling technologies is that geothermal projects that were not viable 10 years ago are viable now. You want that innovation. American companies pay their taxes. They pay their sovereign royalties. And we don't bring in an army full of expats. You go into any American company, you won't just find local laborers. You'll find technicians, accountants, CEOs, because that's the business model. I'm just going to end with, I recently read a book by the first American ambassador ever in Kenya. And he went out to Kenya thinking he was going to talk about all things Kenyan. What he found was, in the mid-1960s, that he was completely swept up in the politics of the DRC. And if you go to Kenya today, you'll find them swept up in the politics of the DRC. I felt like the book that I was reading, set in the mid-1960s, could have been written today. But we have an opportunity to have that cycle end and take a leap forward so that we're not having the same conversation about the future of the DRC 30 years from now, because this is the opportunity. And so I will stop there, and I am absolutely thrilled both to read the contributions of our panel and to hear what they have to say next. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Ambassador Futrell and Ambassador Yad.
It's a positive description. I just wanted to recognize the presence of two interesting people. The new ambassador of the Republic of Benin, Agnola Awonmenu, who is here. Congratulations and welcome to Washington. It deserves a round of applause, I think. Yeah. And somebody who has been the inaugural commander of the U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, General William Ward. Welcome. Carol Van Dam Volk from Voice of America to moderate this conversation.
Thank you, Ambassador Yad. And I'm going to just reintroduce everybody on the panel, just in case some of our remote viewers or people here in the audience joined us a little late. We have Caliste Ahupose, she's Mission Chief of the DRC International Monetary Fund. Nicole Namweze Batumike, Gender and Responsible Sourcing Specialist, Pansy Foundation. She's joined us virtually. Mavembe Thezo Dizolele from the DRC, lecturer, Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. He's also a former director and senior fellow of the CSIS Africa program. And Dave Peterson on my far left, he is the former senior director of the Africa program of the National Endowment for Democracy. Thank you all for being here today, and you in the audience and our virtual audience. And I just want to remind viewers, too, that they can post their questions to askac.org, and we'll try to get as many of those up and voiced as we can. A high-ranking government official with the Democratic Republic of Congo, Mr. Miguel Kashab Katem, who had something called the Regulatory Authority for Subcontracting in the Private Sector, said at a recent mining conference in South Africa that the DRC is open to all investors who want to develop its $24 trillion in untapped mineral deposits. But especially it wants to partner with what it calls modern investors who can support the country's economic development. First off, Dave Patterson, $24 trillion, that's a lot of money. And what kinds of minerals are we talking about, and is that number accurate?
Well, I haven't done a careful analysis of the number, but it certainly is the figure that is being thrown out these days. I've seen bigger figures, and I think there's no question that DRC has enormous amount of wealth, whether it's in the minerals, the coltan, the gold, the diamonds. It's not mentioned in the report, but tin is a very important resource there too. I saw the UAE just committed more than $300 million to invest in the tin mines. Of course, there's enormous potential in the water, the hydropower, the agriculture potential, just the human potential. There's so much energy in Congo. There's certainly great potential, whether it's worth $26 trillion, it could be more.
Do any of you disagree with that?
No.
Caliste Akuposi, what kinds of economic development in the DRC are you expecting from these so-called modern investors?
Yeah. So maybe, thank you, Carol, and maybe let me start by reinforcing what Dave just said, that the potential of the country is very, very huge, right? Not only in the mining sector, but also if you look at the population, large and young population, they have it. Water potential, it's huge. Hydropower potential is very large. You look everywhere, the potential is there. The question is, how do you go from the potential to actual resources and support development? I think it's not an easy transition, particularly if you consider all the challenges that the country has, right? We all know about the security and political challenges, and Ambassador spoke about this a short while ago. There are other social issues. There are gaps in infrastructure, huge gaps, economic gaps in infrastructure. So there are a lot of challenges that the country needs to tackle in health as well. There are a lot of challenges. So how do you match, do you go from the potential to face the challenges and then have actual resources? I think, as you can tell, if you development in DRC or in everywhere actually has many strengths, right? It's not just like a focus on purely economic issues. There are political, social, and other things that need to be tackled, governance, etc., that need to be tackled. But having said that, I want to say, from our perspective, one easy or relatively easy way for them to go from potential to actual resources is really to focus on some economic gaps that they can close. For example, in infrastructure, you look at road coverage of a country is very weak, right? You look at energy production is also relatively weak, despite the potential. So if they can focus on those, that would be a huge that make a huge difference. Not only for the mining sector, right, to unlock that 24 trillion that you were talking about earlier, but also to have a positive spillover in other sectors. So for example, one of the reasons why DRC is not really a powerhouse in agricultural production is because a lot of the production goes to waste on farms because it's very costly to transport the goods to the nearest market. By the time you get to the market, the cost of transportation is so prohibitive that it makes no sense to even try to trade. And you can apply that to many, many other sectors, including the mining sector, where it contributes to raising costs.
So by the time they get there, the fruits and vegetables have rotted.
Exactly, exactly. So you can see the impact in agriculture, the potential there, the potential in health, right? Because to reach some of these areas is not easy. The potential in education, right? Because you need people to go, teachers and whoever else to go reach the remote population. So we can see a huge spillover there, but you can start from the road and energy to support the mining sector and also have the spillover in other sectors.
So you're basically talking about reinvestment. It's critical to reinvestment from what you gain from the mining sector.
Absolutely.
Into the industry and the capital of the government.
Yeah.
We have one question that kind of touches on what we've been just talking about. And Ambassador Futrell talked about improving the business climate. What can African countries do now to show they are serious about American investment? That's a question that's coming from our virtual audience. Mavemba, why don't you take that?
Thank you very much. And thank you, Atlantic Council, for hosting us. That's the wrong question. It's not about what African countries should do to bring American interest or investment. The question is, what can America do to bring its own investment to Africa? I mean, the idea that Africa somehow has to change overnight and then Americans will come, it's very retrograde. It's totally disconnected with the realities of today. Today, we're not in the midst of the Cold War. Today, we're in the midst of a emerging multilateral, multipolar world with a lot of powers that were not there. Dave, or I think Alex was just mentioning the UAE. You get the Gulf Arab states that are playing a role. You have China that is no longer the poor country of my childhood, and you name it. So the EU, the US were actually in the receding end of this. I'm happy to hear Ambassador Futrell talk about the US is going to be doing more of this commercial engagement. So we should not wait for other people to set the table, and then the US will come somehow when the rule of law becomes the norm. I think the US need to get involved no matter what, because the value that Ambassador Futrell was just mentioning, the importance of a country like DRC or any other African country for that matter, we have already decided that it's important in the US. Either it's important, therefore we get involved, or it's not important and we continue talking. So I think the question is badly posed. I will say, let's get there. Let's stop talking about values. Let's start delivering those values. And you deliver those values by setting up shop. People come and work there. They absorb the value that you have about procurement, about sexual harassment, whatever it is. 15 years later, when they go open their own shop, those will become their values. If we're not there, the Chinese values will win. It doesn't make a difference whether we say in Foggy Bottom or Atlantic or any other institution. So I think we need to change the prism and the way we look at this. What is it that the Chinese are saying that we don't see? What is it that the Indians are saying that we don't see? US Exim Bank, DFC should be household names in Africa. They're not. The Chinese Exim Bank is.
Could it be that, though, Americans are a little more reticent to get involved because they see what's going on and they know the potential, but they're a little bit reticent because of the dangerous conditions on the ground in parts of the DRC?
The DRC is the size of Western Europe. So if you say there's conflict in Portugal and you're afraid to go invest in Greece and Norway and so on, the argument does not hold. The DRC is big. India is big. The conflict in Kashmir and Punjab that had been going on for a long time, that did not stop anybody from investing in India. Colombia has FARC. Since I was a kid, it's still going on. We're still investing. So this is the challenge of the prism. I think if the way we assess risk is a problem. Risk should not be assessed in the way we do it in Iowa if we're covering the DRC. Risk is risk everywhere, but risk comes with opportunity.
Or Chicago, Illinois.
Or Chicago, Illinois. So to me, it's actually a passé analytical prism if we're talking about this world we live in today.
Okay, I'm going to bring in Nicole. Nicole is patiently waiting there in the virtual world there to join us, our panelists. Nicole Namweze Batumike, U.S. President Donald Trump says the U.S. wants in on Africa's minerals markets, even calling it critical to national security. But China controls most, if not all, of the DR Congo's mineral supply chains at this time. Add to that, the Trump administration is accusing China of slow-walking export approvals of rare earth minerals after the tariff war broke out several weeks ago, and you don't have a very rosy outlook of the U.S. gaining access to the DRC's minerals anytime soon. Has the on-again, off-again tariff roller coaster ride that we've all been witnessing, coupled with the deadly M23 violence, and despite the uninviting circumstances in the DRC, including the ongoing instability in the East and a challenging global economic climate, we can't forget that. Will major minerals deals, do you think, go forward between the U.S. and the DRC?
Thank you, Carol. So good morning, everyone from Lubumbashi here. I would say that, yes, we can see that the mineral deals are moving forward, that we are having, aside from the task force that were mentioned by the ambassador, we do have groups of people from the DRC that are coming to Washington, D.C. regularly to discuss the mineral deals. We did have different offers and contracts that have been discussed between Cobalt and the DRC as well, for example. So looking at how things are being moved forward despite the uninviting environment as you've described it, it is important to understand what the incentives are for both sides. So on the side of the U.S., what we have are relatively preferential conditions that are being offered by the DRC. The DRC government also is seeking to have a form of support in those peace talks that are happening, but there is also an interest in security for the regime, right? What we are now seeing happening between between the China or the U.S. is that we do have the U.S. that can come in the DRC and we and have access to high quality minerals through the assets that are being made available for them. When we look at the lithium assets, for example, new assets have been offered to the U.S. reportedly. And when we look at the cobalt environment, we are talking about assets that are currently already, it's been explored, it's existing, and it's parts of the DRC's parts, or the government's parts in those companies that are we are going to guarantee quantity to the U.S. through those. So again, those talks have been moving forward, and there is a clear idea of where we are going. Reportedly, there are also discussions on the mine sites in Eastern Congo where the conflict is. So that would be the mine of Rubaya, for example. Reportedly, there are also discussions in the gold sector. We have different actors in Bukavu who are active in South Kivu that are currently seeking to be on the list as well and engage with U.S. stakeholders there. So again, incentives exist on both sides, but what we have to be very careful with is to understand how we can use this current dynamics to create something that is going to be truly sustainable for both the investors in the U.S. and the Congolese population. Because as we know, up until now, historically, mining has not necessarily meant benefit or profit for the Congolese population, and the risk of overlooking this or the elements that would respond to the negative impacts and externalities that mining has had on Congolese population up until today will mean that we are re-entering a cycle of unsustainable deals between those actors and the DRC again.
Nicole mentions, unsustainable deals. Dave, let me ask you as a follow-up to what Nicole's talking about. Why are these deals happening now, or at least talks to get into a deal with the DR Congo happening now? And would a long-term situation be sustainable?
Well, clearly with the EV revolution, the United States needs to have access to these critical minerals. But, I do fear that we've sort of missed the boat, that the Chinese are way ahead of us in Congo and much of Africa. The UAE understands what's necessary, and they're moving quickly. They're taking risks. I hope that these discussions about the security situation in the East that the United States is leading will be successful and serious. But we've seen a lot of talk before, and it hasn't always gone very far. So I think we need to get serious. President Tshisekedi came in with a lot of hope that he would make things different, that there would be reforms, that the governance problems would be tackled seriously, and that hasn't happened. The M23 with Rwanda's support has just taken over the entire eastern part of the country. The insecurity is, just terrible. We read every day about the massacres. I, don't know if others have seen the report recently that, the Chinese are sort of turning the tables on us. Whereas I think the United States' comparative advantage is, our reputation for good governance and, fighting corruption. There was a report that in Libero, I think, that one of the American mines was trying to create conflict in one of the Chinese operations. And was fueling the conflict in effect. We can't be accused of doing the things that we're criticizing the Chinese for. We have to have a higher standard, and with the pullout of USAID. There were hundreds of millions of dollars that were going to support all kinds of projects. Those have disappeared. It's, from the Congolese perspective, I think, we have to understand, the Congolese are going to say, Congo first. They don't care, if the United States doesn't have something to bring to the table, then, they're going to go to the Chinese, the UAE, to Turkey, you name it. We've got to be serious if we want to have access to these minerals. It's not like, we're automatically the good guys anymore.
Nicole, you wanted to quickly weigh in on that question too about the long-term sustainability of a U.S.-Congo deal.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think that there are different ways that we could approach that, but one thing that we know is necessary for everyone is to have a clear framework of that partnership, and that a clear framework that would dictate the conditions of the deals. And I was thinking as Dave was speaking that we do have development financial institutions. In the US, we have DHC that is active in the DRC and in the neighboring countries as well. If mining entities, if companies want to get loans, those loans really should be conditioned based on frameworks that would be existing between the US and the DRC, but also based on frameworks that already exist and standards, international standards that already exist, such as the due diligence that you need to do, for example, to be listed as one of the Responsible Minerals Initiative certified company, for example. That should be, it shouldn't just be, it should be a requirement. It shouldn't just be something that will set you aside and show that you're performing well. It should be an imperative condition to get any sort of loan that is coming from the US, to get any sort of loan that is coming from a Congolese bank as well. And to make sure that we can do that, it's better to have something that would give us alignment, right? So again, a framework such as a responsible sourcing framework, for example. There are also initiatives from other governments, such as the UK government or the Swiss government, that are supporting the government in the DRC or other governments in the region to work on policy reforms to, again, improve the context in ways that will truly include the demands from the civil societies, from the mining communities. And here on both sides, when we think about the tax reforms that we could work on, such as regional reforms, for example, that would mean that, first of all, when we are talking about a peace deal, when we are looking at the Declaration of Principles that was signed on April 25th, how can we discuss such deals or a regional reintegration when we do have a tax system that incentivizes smuggling? Right now, it's so expensive to export from the DRC, right? So it's existing. So you will go to Rwanda to.
Plus, you have the illegal mining sector involved, and that kind of messes up any kind of agreements. Thank you.
Exactly.
Did you want to say something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I
sure,
may.
Go ahead.
Here,
Then I'm going to go to an anonymous question.
Yeah, so I think, of course, I don't know why deals are popping up now and there is interest. I think maybe that's a question for those who are trying to get into DRC. But I want to put in perspective the situation of the country, to note that, I mean, in the late 1990s, it was almost a failed state. The country has come a long way. It was almost a failed state, to the point that virtually the central bank was not working. They had to reintroduce the currency, I think around 2000 or 2002. And they had to rebuild the state. It took a lot of effort.
Because of what, the corruption?
No, there was the regime of Mobutu collapsed, and there were a lot of civil war, internal, there were a lot of internal issues, right? So even on the economic side, I mean, nothing was working. The administration virtually was not functioning. At certain point, it was very difficult. And as I said, they even had to reintroduce the currency because the previous currency was not worth anything. Right?
When you say reintroduce, like start a whole new currency?
Yes. Right? It used to be the Zaire, and then it lost value by, like, I don't know, 2,000 or 5,000% of value was lost. So they had to reintroduce this. They had, so they had a long process where the countries were building itself up until maybe 2008 and 9. And then at that time, the regime decided to disengage from the international community. So there was no contact with the World Bank, the IMF, or the US, or any other Western partners. For almost 12 or 15 years, there was no interaction. That's when the country turned to China. And
they fill the gap.
Yeah. Now, since 2019, there is a real will to re-engage with the international community. And you can see, even in terms of relationship with other partners, I mean, the relationships have improved a lot more. Engagement with the IMF, World Bank, and other institutions has also been strong. Now, they have a lot of challenges, and I think it's a journey of maybe 100 kilometers or miles, and maybe they're taking step 5 or step 10. So you may not see progress there, but if you put in perspective the challenges, I think the country is coming a long way. And maybe to reiterate the point another panelist made before, I don't think people should wait for the situation to be perfect to come in, because we would encourage those who are interested to come in, because once you come in, you have also leverage, and you can change things. And we've seen that with our engagement at the IMF, that it has helped.
Well, to that point,
it's not perfect, but it's making progress.
Right.
So measure the progress. That's what
I've got a
our
question
message.
from an anonymous viewer in the audience. Can the U.S. private sector really become a substitute for China and U.S. development assistance, given the short term left in the Trump administration and his notoriously transactional approach? How can Africa rely on it and commit to it at the expense of China? Who wants to take that? Caliste? Or Uvemba?
All right. Well, I don't think the U.S. is going to become a substitute to China. I mean, this is the entire thing about what does Congo mean to the U.S. It's not about what Congo means to China. We continue engaging over the last 20 years in this debate that is so U.S.-centric, believing that we have the panacea to come and resolve the problem in Africa. That's so far from it. The reality is, Calixte just said that a country like Congo has come a long way. They've changed the mining code. The mining code was actually, I would disagree a little bit with Calixte, because right after the war, the World Bank, the IMF imposed a very bad deal to the Congolese. It was based on the reality that you just described. Like, your country is not investable grade, you need to accept. The DRC did. And DRC was pretty much looted. They privatized everything because Jekamin was not functioning very well, almost dead, to Calixte's point. We imposed all kinds of things on the Congolese, and they took it because they had no options. But 20 years now, from that time, they've changed the mining code. It's been very inclusive, civil society, FEC, government, ministry. There's a new mining code that makes it that so Congolese can gain more. They're not where they need to be yet. They can gain more. So the mining week is happening in Katanga today. If in Kolwezi, you will not recognize Kolwezi today because there is revenues coming in and rising. So they've come a long way. Civil society in Congo is very strong. Congo was suspended in 2013 from the EITI, the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, not because Congo is the most corrupt countries in the region. Far from it. Angola, Rwanda, all these countries have corruption, high level of them. The DRC has a civil society that these other countries don't have. It's that civil society that did work and showed that revenues were not going into the national coffers, they were being diverted, and therefore, and that has gone a long way. So I think as US, the obsession with China is actually annoying to Africans. And it's annoying to anybody else in the world. Just come. Yeah? Ask not what the Chinese are doing. Ask what you can do for this place, right? And do it.
That has a familiar ring to
Stop
it.
talking. Just come and deliver. So we have companies in Africa. We have Barrick Gold. In 2006, I was covering the war in Ituri. I think it was Anglo-American or Ashanti Gold that was exploiting its gold while the war was going on. Talking about risk. They were doing it. I was embedded with peacekeepers, and Mongwalu was open for business. So if you want to talk about risk, what is it that these people saw that they went and still exploited in the middle of the conflict, that today we cannot go to Equateur, we cannot go to Kasai? There's no conflict in any of these places. Remember I was talking about Portugal and Norway. There's an entire country that you can exploit. So this obsession and calling it substitute, that mindset is already a problem. And I will continue insisting on this. There's no substitute of anyone. The market is open. Come.
Are you saying there's a misperception out there that even though nobody denies that there is massive violence and tens of thousands of people have been killed, especially in eastern DRC with this? And by the way, you both mentioned, Dave and you have both mentioned Rwanda. Rwanda denies that they support the M23 rebels, but the United Nations says there's credible evidence that they are. But I mean, is there a misconception that most or all of DRC is dangerous, and therefore, hold back, don't get involved, and China's already there and taken up everything as far as the mining industry goes. So we're just not going to go. I mean, are you saying
it's a very bad misconception? I don't think misconception is the right word. It's almost evil and bad practice. The DRC again is the size of Western. The DRC has 2 time zones. It's the only African country with 2 time zones, just to give you a sense of how big the place is. So if we're talking about Goma, all the noise about M23, 140 militia groups is in less than 10% of the country. The narrative in the media is taking that as the main, but that's not the narrative of the country. So we're talking about something that is not even there. We're looking at monsters under the bed who are not there.
Is that true, Dave? You agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. In Lubumbashi, I was there a year or so ago, and things seemed like they were going just fine. In Kinshasa, in many parts of the country, it's quite peaceful. What I would suggest, I don't know if this is politically correct or not, but that the United States maybe start talking to China. Start talking to some of the other. Maybe you already are. Of course, in terms of trying to find a peaceful solution to the problem in Eastern Congo. To get Rwanda to the table, the Congolese government, the other countries around Congo, to include civil society, to include some of the opposition political parties. I think the Panzi Foundation paper was really spot on in terms of how that peace process could be successful. I mean, it's one thing if you have a couple people at the top that are trying to strike a deal. Mm-hmm. It's another if you have the entire country that's invested mm-hmm. In peace, if you have the neighbors that are invested in peace, if everybody sees, this is a win-win situation. There's a lot of money to be made in Congo. There is a lot that the Congolese people can gain from a responsible investment.
So you're saying we need all parties at the table if
that's right. I don't.
Going to be made.
I mean, I don't think that this sort of ideas Mbemba was saying is that we've got to sort of outcompete the Chinese somehow. Mm. The Chinese already are in control. It's not like they're going to cede their position easily. I think we've got to talk to the Chinese. We've got to, talk to the other parties that are involved there and try to come up with something that is in the best interest of Congo.
I want to just say, with all this discussion, I just want to mention that with these authors here and the presentation, it's being done in conjunction with a major report that is just out today on the Atlantic Council website, capitalizing on DRC's opportunities beyond critical minerals. So you should all take a look at that. Let me squeeze in another anonymous question. Aside from cobalt and coltan, where does the DRC have a dominant position? There are other countries with mineral reserves that are often easier for the U.S. and Western companies. How does one make the case that a mining company should focus on the DRC with a high-risk perception rather than Brazil, Australia, or Chile? And this is from Patrick Stewart, Acting Director of the Office of African Nations. Who wants to take that?
Yeah, I'll go here and say, look, I think we have to look at it from the perspective of what the authorities need to do to improve the business environment in general, right? The country has challenges, that's for sure. And as I said earlier, nobody can sit here and say, like, everything is good in DRC. I mean, there are a lot of challenges. We can go into a lot of details. But the approach should be partner with a country and try to make things change. And we have seen that work with some partners who are coming back gradually and helping and pushing for change, right? And make sure that things are going in the right direction, right? Otherwise, if you look at it from the perspective of like, comparing to Brazil, for example, of course, or compare it to Chile, of course, things are probably more like orderly and clear in Chile compared to DRC. But that doesn't mean that you have to choose. You can partner with both, try to push change here, because the potential is very big, and if the companies work with a country to make sure that the necessary is done in terms of infrastructure, improving the business environment, is going to help their companies, help the country, and benefit everybody. So you have to look at it from that perspective. And maybe since I have the floor to clarify something quickly, I think from the IMF perspective, what happened was a disengagement of the authorities, not imposing conditions. Now, we can have a long debate on this, but this is not maybe the place. Since I'm mission chief, I can tell you that commitment from the authorities make a huge difference. It at the highest level, you don't have that commitment, you're not gonna make progress. So I think we have to put in perspective that the DRC not engaging with the international community for like 12 years, we can have enough blame for all sides.
To go around.
Yeah. But I want to say that, there are things that need to be fixed, but people cannot wait for the perfect situation to say they want to come in when things are clean here.
Cool.
Yeah.
Real quick, because we only have a couple,
No,
we only have
just
less than 2
quick
minutes.
here. One thing that gets missed out in this analysis, the DRC is a very open society with a very strong, instead of all the trouble that we read about it, on any given day, you can listen to Radio Okapi, you can listen to Top Congo, you know exactly where the pulse of the country is. So if we're looking for solution, if we're looking for a way to engage, the Congolese people are the most open talk. They will give you all the information you don't need at any time. So please keep that in mind. Congo is not a closed society, it's not Rwanda, it's not nobody. So that's important, right?
Okay.
We need to know that.
Let me get in one more question real quick, and we've only got like a minute to answer. Let's talk about the downside of mining these minerals. Extracting critical minerals has led to a significant environmental cost and health hazards. Extraction is linked to deforestation, loss of biodiversity, toxic chemicals are used to do it. They pollute the groundwater resources. There's labor, child labor. Women and children are degraded. What are we going to do about that? Nicole, why don't you answer that first? And just say real quick.
So again, coming back as well on my colleague's intervention, as they explained, the country is very big, and we do have the war in Eastern Congo. We can very much link the exploitation, the extraction of the minerals with the rapes, the extreme prevalence of rape in Eastern Congo. It's different in Katanga, but the human rights violations are still happening. As you mentioned, extractivism, mining will have negative consequences very often. Again, coming back on creating frameworks and conditions, at least now with the specific circumstances that we are in between the DRC and the US, there is an opportunity for us to create a responsible sourcing framework together with a multi-stakeholder framework and make sure that there are legal instruments that are guiding those engagements and the collaboration.
I'll have to cut it off there. We ran out of time a lot quicker than I thought we would. I want to thank our panelists and Ambassador Ramayad, Senior Director, Africa Center of the Atlantic Council here, Ambassador Troy Fitreau. Thanks so much for staying with us too, because I know you have something else to get to. Senior Bureau Official at the African Affairs with the U.S. State Department. Our virtual audience and our real audience here, thanks a lot for joining us today. We really appreciate it.